narcissists envied, too lucky in love. See, we view the word narcissist as a pejorative. We think we know what a narcissist is and what's the matter with him or her. But maybe actually our emotion about them is that they've found someone to love and they're happy in it. What if that's the case? What would it say about us? And I think that's part of what the epigrams are trying to do, is to shake one's easy assumptions about what's good and bad, how things work. We tell ourselves a lot of stories, and not all of them are true. The Spanish conquistadors slaughtered the Indians of the Caribbean for being, among other things, sodomites. Opposites attract.
What made you think of that one?
I was reading something about the Spanish conquest of the Caribbean, and that was apparently one of the phrases they used to impugn the Indians for being subhuman, though the Spanish at that time had about 1,000 words for fucking males fucking other males in the ass. I mean, so, Jesus Christ, you know. Here comes Vic in the back door, by the way.
Hey, Vic.
Yes.
You understand what Tom's up to?
No.
Not even in bed.
No.
Vic, you know, is the occasion for this book of epigrams, because since I had to stay home while she was studying for her PhD orals, I had nothing to do, so I thought, oh well, what shall I do? I'll write another book. So she's the proximate cause. Poor thing.
Do I get all the credits?
Yeah, you get and all the money.
Okay.
That reminds me of a man who circumcised elephants. The pay was bad, but the tips were huge. The royalties for a book of epigrams aren't going to be huge, baby. Now I tell you. Yeah. Sometimes I'm counting on the blank page to carry weight that the spoken phrase would not. What I'm up to there is the words themselves in that case. There's nothing complicated in the syntax or the meaning, but the white space I'm hoping will force the reader to let it reverberate, the phrase, and to see, you know, what could I possibly mean by this, and I'm hoping it will be subversive. Well, what would be happening if after a year of marriage a guy is putting on weight? The French writer Jabez, who was an Egyptian Jew living in Paris, he argued that the white space is more important than the text itself. And that's an interesting idea. So one of the things the epigrammist has to play with is the white space. And so in this short one, I'm not playing with linguistic tricks or compression, really. I'm putting out a simple sentence and hoping it reverberates in complicated ways. A lot of what's going on in the epigrams is making the reader complete the thought or the sentiment or connect the dots. Here's one. Are you waiting to die? Suicides as control freaks. Now, two things are on my mind about that. One is there's this weird moment at which you suddenly realize you're really going to die. I don't mean that you didn't always know that or make reference to it or acknowledge it in some abstract sense. But there does seem to be a line you cross where people are dropping like flies all around you and you actually realize you have 10 or 15 or 17 or 19 years left to go. That's very odd. And then once you notice that you have only 15 or 20 years left, now you start dating everything from that ending. as opposed to saying, oh, I'm 20 now, meaning I was born 20 years ago. The arithmetic comes from a different vantage point. So in that sense, even if you're not actively waiting to die, you're waiting to die. And it amused me to think of suicides as people who are trying to change that passivity into something active. And the other thing that's going on for me in that is that we think of suicides as a bad thing. And maybe they are. But that maybe they are, for some people, an expression of a desire to control what we are otherwise helpless in the face of, which is our mortality. Okay. Sometimes, as I say, I'm both trying to get at a sentiment in an epigram, but also to coin a word or a phrase. So, at the buffet table of sexual pleasure, the masturbatrix helped herself. Well, a masturbator is a phrase we know well, but you know how you have a dominator and a dominatrix. So I thought, how about a masturbator and a masturbatrix, T-R-I-X. At the buffet table of sexual pleasure, the masturbatrix helped herself. And of course I have to make it a food thing, so I can get in the thing, helping herself. That's my job. Sometimes I'm just hearing an idiom as if for the first time. Who gives a shit? Who gives a shit? We say it all the time. But maybe we shouldn't talk that way, even though I do a lot. Because I come from Boston, and as kids we talked a lot like that.
Implicating yourself here?
Well, I'm in a new relationship. I'm in a new relationship, and it's very passionate. And I've certainly been taking advantage of Vic where I can. And but there is that odd moment when you're kind of stunned with what you've achieved, and that made me think. And so here's what I came up with. Limbs intertwined, eyes glazed, orgasms achieved. The amnesiacs are unable to recall who, what, where, when, or why. The promises we make, I love to play with the promises we make so sincerely and our inability to live up to them. You know, what's going on there too is my own capacity for fidelity. When I read this to Vic, she said, "Is that about you?" And I was a little bit shocked, and I said, "Oh no, the epigrams are an effort at universality." But she read me right. And how unkind of her to do that. One of the things that interests me is how people seem to deny the inevitability of their death as they get older. Well, in that one, I'm saying that his failure to tackle what's really true is what the reader is left with, that the writer is ducking, dealing with what he should be addressing. At a certain point, for a writer, for instance, to go back and write some more about his childhood is just dodging the issue. He's written enough, usually, about his childhood, and better to write about things that are getting more